Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson. Hello and welcome back to the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Sven has long been considered one of the most influential people in the Australian bar industry. He's the owner of multiple award-winning venues under the Speakeasy Group, founded a hospitality-dedicated training platform, and a bar industry consultancy. He often writes for industry and consumer publications, presents as a keynote speaker, and has been inducted by the Keepers of The Quaich, a global honour for dedication to Scotch Whisky. Something that piqued my interest more recently was the Speakeasy Group's Pathway to Partnership program, an innovative way to support hospitality professionals to become venue owners. The group has supported previous and early guests of the program, Boon and Pez Collier, to create the hugely successful Melbourne cocktail bar, Pearl Diver. Hello and welcome to the show, Sven.
Hey James, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. It's been a long time coming. We've known each other in the digital sphere and I guess through other people for a number of years now. And a few guests have mentioned your name and your group over the years. I really wanted to get you on and I appreciate you coming onto the program and joining me. So thank you for putting the time aside to be on the show.
Thanks for having me.
As the first question that I have on the program for all guests is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I'd love to know what you've got for the program today.
Yeah. So I've heard this question before. One of my friends were on there not long ago, Paul Schulte, and I think he said that some of the crazy stories probably aren't suitable for the podcast. I think I probably sit in the same sphere, but in terms of exceptional hospitality, I've been fortunate enough to experience a lot. But the story that came to mind first that was something that happened at one of our venues. I wasn't there for it, but I was told about it. And we have a guy called Jack Sotti working for us years ago at Boilermaker House, and we had a whiskey tasting coming in for, I think it was a birthday boy. And when he looked up the person's name, it sounded Scottish, and he was then able to track down, I suppose, the clan that he came from originally, that his family comes from in Scotland. And when these people came in for the whiskey tasting, he had basically printed the tasting mats in a tartan of this guy's family. He had based all the whiskeys on around distilleries that were in the area that his family originally came from in Scotland, and went that really extra mile to ensure that this tasting was going to be something extraordinary and something very tailored to that person, rather than just knocking out a cookie cutter tasting, which you could have done and nobody would have known the better. And for me, it's an example that we use a lot, group, when we talk to our team about service and about providing experiences, because I think it is such a great example of how if you go the extra mile and you really try to exceed expectations, you can have a massive impact on people and in that moment and also ongoing. And the feedback we got from that tasting and the feedback we got in the business was just incredible. And these people were regulars for a long time afterwards. So that was the thing that immediately sprung to mind.
I'd met Jack at Boilermaker a number of years ago. And I think he's in London now, I believe, if he's still over there. He absolutely gave me an amazing experience. I think that was the first time I went to Boilermaker. I was probably served by Jack. So what do you do then to educate your teams, like how to actually identify how to provide that exceptional experience and what that can be? Because it can take many forms, right? So how do you teach your staff to not just look for it, but then find and then choose these things that you can do that go above and beyond?
So we do a number of things. And I think the first thing we do is that we try to actually systemize it rather than making it up to each individual staff member to be there. So as a business, we try to live in that special occasion space where you come to us for your dates and your anniversaries and your birthdays. And so we try to systemize exceptional service and systemize exceeding expectations. As an example, when you go to Mjölner, which is our Viking-inspired restaurant, and when you arrive, you get a free drink on the house, which is a mead, and it's served in a small horn-shaped shot glass. So you can't actually put this glass down without actually finishing the drink that's inside. You choose your own weapon. You're presented with a leather knife roll where you select from a variety of hand-carved and Viking-inspired knives that come from all over the world. Some are made from bones, some are wood. And we have a number of things that form part of our sequence of service that give our team the chance to exceed expectation and really capitalize on the moment without having to come up with these things day after day themselves and fine-tune it to the individual. But then also on top of that, we run workshops on how to exceed expectations and how we can improve things. And we frame our values and we frame our training around the idea that when people come to our venues, they're not here on any given day. They're here for a special occasion. And it's our job to make sure that they walk out of here having had an amazing time and that we respect the fact that this may not be something that they can do every day. It may be up to young parents who haven't been out in 2.5 years because they've had a young child with colic and they can't find babysitters or whatever it is. And when they come out to us, they may have been looking forward to that for months. So I think part of it is systemizing where we can, and part of it is impressing on the team the reason why people come out and what's at stake for them when they're out here. And it can be hard for hospitality staff to understand that not everybody has the access to bars and restaurants that they do. Not everybody has the time to go out and enjoy these things that some younger people might have. So I think that's part of it all. It's the systemizing and then the ongoing messaging to the... Obviously, then you have these fortunate instances where individual team members really take things into their own hands and deliver something exceptional to the guest. And that can't be systemized. That's got to come from the heart. There's got to be a true hospitality person delivering that.
Thank you for elaborating on that, Sven. It's really interesting hearing your thoughts on that. And I want to elaborate on this concept a little bit more, but I'm going to broaden it in a sec. But the reason that it's particularly interesting is for listeners out there, Sven has one of the most well-known hospitality groups in Australia and easily one of the most highly regarded within the hospitality industry. So anytime that you interact with one of your venues, Sven, it's always been a really good experience for me. And I'm certain that other people will be in the same boat. I'm wondering, what do you think makes businesses successful in hospitality?
Hospitality, obviously, a difficult business to make a success. I think there's a number of different factors, right? And I think sometimes it can just be the location, right? I think if you have a venue that's got a great location, you may be able to have great success without having an amazing product because it is such a great spot. And that can also come down to a convenient location for a lot of people to go to. For us, on the other hand, what we think drives success is providing a great experience. And by great experience, I don't just mean a good product. I think a lot of people think of hospitality, strangely, it's called hospitality, right? But people often will think of it as food and beverage, which is often how it's described in, say, the hotel industry. But hospitality is hospitality. It's about the experience that we have. It's not about the food and beverage only. It's everything around it. And for us, what I think has delivered success, if we've had it in our group, it would be this ongoing focus on building an experience for the guest. And so when we create a concept, we don't just focus on, okay, what's the food and the drink's going to be? We write a story. We start with what happens when the person's trying to find the venue. What's that feel like? Because most of our venues are very difficult to find. So how does that struggling to find the door impact the experience? And what happens when they open the door? And what's their emotions when they hear the music? And how do they feel when they see the staff in their uniforms so they fit out? And what are the different things that happen throughout that night? And at the end of it, have they been entertained or have they just been fed? And for us, I think as hospitality, if you look towards the future, hospitality really is going to have to step up its game and deliver better experiences overall, because the competition isn't the local pub or the restaurant next door. The competition is Netflix, it's Hulu, it's Stan, it's Amazon Prime, it's the couch at home. And as everything becomes more convenient at home, as it becomes convenient to eat and drink at home, you can order bottled cocktails and you can order fine dining food pretty much delivered to your doorstep, and you can sit and eat on your comfortable couch and watch your favorite show and do it for cheaper than it is to go to a restaurant. We have to start really stepping up that experience component of our businesses. What drives success depends on the segment you're in. For certain parts of the hospitality segment, having a great location, being really convenient, price point, etc., speed of service, it all really depends on the segment of the industry that you play in. But for us, it really does come down to experiences and making great experiences happen.
There are a lot of really fantastic things that you touched on there in your answer. I want to actually ask a question about the very first thing you said, which is about great location. As an independent operator, how do you get any data to drive those decisions on where that location should be? You're relying on agents, like real estate agents, to tell you that sort of information, or how do you go about that?
I almost hate to admit that we're incredibly unscientific in this approach. We don't do any research on that. I don't believe in this build it, they'll come. I think that's an incredibly naive and extremely dangerous approach to take to business. Just because you do something doesn't mean people are going to come to see you. On the other hand, I do believe that if you're operating in a special occasion kind of segment that we do, people will travel or people will make an effort to get to you. So we actually rely more on the strength of the concept and the strength of the execution to get people to our venues than we do on location. The sweet spot for us, if I'm being super transparent, what we really look, we want a venue that's convenient and easy to get to, but relatively difficult to find, if that makes sense. ODV Melbourne is a good example. It's pretty central in the city in Melbourne, but finding it can be hard. It's in a laneway of a laneway. There's no sign. It's a completely unmarked door.
It was described to me, Sven, as they said, walk down the alleyway until you find the ornate door handle. That was the way it was described to me.
Exactly. Not much to go on in the dark, looking for an ornate door handle. That is for us the key thing. Melbourne has always been CBD focused. We're becoming more focused on the CBD in Sydney because you have more people that can be your potential customer. And that allows us then to play in that high-end special occasion space that we love to play in. It's harder to do that once you leave a high traffic area.
What differences do you see between Melbourne and Sydney? Because you operate in both, or you have operated in both. What do you see as actually the key differences between those two markets?
There's a few big differences. We operate in both still, and the goal is to be equal across both. The Melbourne market, I think people have a little bit more access to money there, I think, than they do in Sydney in terms of the cost of living, I think, is cheaper in terms of rent, etc. So you combine that with a very, I suppose, Italian and Spanish, I suppose, culture, that a lot of European culture in Melbourne. So people go out more often. So in Melbourne, we tend to see that you can have a busy Monday and busy Tuesday. ODV could have a line out the door on a Monday pre-COVID. That would be very rare to see in Sydney. Sydney is more of a weekend warrior kind of approach where people go out on Friday and Saturday. Melbourne has more nightlife throughout the week. And that also comes down to the geographical kind of layout of the city. Melbourne CBD is surrounded by inner city suburbs, whereas Sydney CBD is flanked with a massive harbour, which then basically blocks a lot of kind of close suburbs from having easy access to the city. But yeah, the biggest difference is people tend to go out more frequently throughout the week. And from a red tape perspective, it is easier to obtain licenses and approvals to start businesses and expand them in Melbourne than it is in Sydney. Sydney has a lot more red tape and a harsher approach to how they manage.
I want to open up a question I normally ask much earlier in the interview, normally as a second question, which is why you do what you do. What is it that really inspires you to do what you do?
I knew this was coming and I never was able to prepare an answer for it in my head. I think initially the reason I do what I do is because it was basically a government immigration stipulation that I stick to hospitality, because back in the day when I first came to Australia, I had a skilled residence visa and that kind of locked me in. To be honest, once you work in hospitality for a while, a lot of us become lifers in a way because it is such an engaging industry. I do feel now what really drives me now with all the technology we have around us, I believe that hospitality is one of the last bastions of personal interaction. If you think about how you go through your life now, how a lot of people go through their life now, they may spend the majority of their work time on a computer, the majority of their meetings on video calls and on phones. That's not personal interaction. People are even studying a lot online. Then you think about how you communicate with your family and your friends. That's a lot of that happens through text messages. A lot happens through say WhatsApp. It's through likes on social media or comments on social media, which is how you keep track of what's happening. A lot of people keep track of what's happening with their friends and family. And so when you're actually seeing your people that you care about face to face, chances are you're in a bar, restaurant or cafe, so in a hospitality setting, or at someone's house party, which to some degree is a hospitality setting as well, or you're at a sports game of some kind. One of the things that I love about hospitality now and that keeps me interested in it is that we can facilitate this human contact. And I think that's really important. From a historical perspective, it really was, I had to do it because otherwise I couldn't stay in Australia. And then second to that, it became a real fascination with history and how the industry functions and how all the things we use and enjoy in industry, where they came from and how they were created and who were behind them, and more like almost an academic love for the background of hospitality. And then as I got older, it became more about this interpersonal relationship that we have with our guests and that we can facilitate between our guests. The greatest joy we have is when somebody can contact us and say that we see proposals happen in our venues all the time. We meet people who've married, who had their first date in their venues. But having that impact on people is really now a great joy of hospitality for me.
You've articulated it very well. I think that when I speak with other operators who've been doing it for a long time, they go through a very similar sort of evolution that you just described there and ultimately come to this resolution of it's about the experience that we provide for people. It's interesting to hear you say that. And with the experience that I have in the industry, I certainly feel similarly too, that going through this journey, something really captivates you initially, or you were locked in by law almost to stay in the industry. From there, you find a way to love it. And then that academic love of it, I found also came through for me. But I'd actually like to explore a little bit more around your personal background, personal professional background. We had a little chat before recording today. I think that it'd be really exciting for listeners to hear a bit about your background. For those that haven't, a lot of the listeners of this particular episode, I'm sure, are going to be people in the industry who have heard of you or are familiar with your work or your venues and maybe even read or listened to you in other domains. But I'd like for you to just elaborate a little bit more on yourself.
I'm from Norway and a very cold country. I arrived here in 96 after I finished up as a second lieutenant or in the Norwegian Navy. And the Navy had a huge impact on me. When I was younger, it taught me a lot about leadership and it taught me about your strengths and weaknesses, and you get a good idea of who you are and what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. And when I finished the Navy, I decided to learn a bit about bartending and hospitality so I could travel the world. It's a great skill to have, to be able to rock up in almost any city in the world. If you can speak English and you can make a good martini, then there's places for you to work. And so I did a bartending course in LA and traveled around the world for a while. And when I arrived then back in Australia, I continued bartending while I studied journalism here. And on a trip back to Norway, I realized, because what I'd been doing with my life since I finished the Navy was traveling and having fun and working as a bartender and just enjoying life. I got back to Norway and a lot of my friends had bought a house and owned cars, and my possessions I could put in a backpack, and that was all of it. And so I then returned back to Australia and decided I needed to maybe start catching up with all my friends back home. And I started an import business, importing vodka before you had the Grey Goose and Belvedere's and stuff here. And we did relatively well with that business, and then went from importing to consulting because we realized it was very hard to beat the big brands, but we were beating them in some aspects. So I then decided I can't beat them outright. I don't have the budget to do it, but I could potentially come in and show them how they could do better in the on-premise. And so we set up a business called Behind Bars, and we did a lot of work with liquor companies and soft drink and energy companies for about a decade. And as part of that, we ran a training program called the Alchemy Program, which we trained about 15,000 bar and wait staff a year for Diageo. And then as that kind of came towards its end, 10 years is a long time, we opened ODV in Sydney in 2010, and then have slowly been building the bar group since. We never meant to start a bar group, but once we closed Behind Bars, we already had 3 venues, the Roosevelt in Sydney and ODV in Melbourne. We then slowly started expanding the business and growing. And the goal has never been and will never be to be a huge group. There's other reasons for growth than to have lots of revenue and lots of profit. But yeah, that's the story in a nutshell.
What then is your reason for building the group? Just to focus on that last bit.
I knew I'd draw myself into a corner there. To be honest, what happens, like when you have a very small group, you have 1 or 2 bars, you work quite closely with people, and it's relatively easily found to attract great people, very skilled people. And ODV, we were extremely blessed. A lot of people that came through and worked in there were considered some of the best bartenders in the world and in the country before they started, and certainly while they were there and afterwards. Because you are there and they know they get to work, be with the owner. Some people are very attracted to that idea of working with the owners. As you then start growing, even at 2, 3 venues, you're too big for some. And what we discovered after a little while was that it was harder to get those really great people that we want to have in the business. And we couldn't get those who wanted to work just because in a small venue where they can have all to say. But there's a lot of other people we wanted to attract, but we just weren't big enough. We didn't have career opportunities for them. And as hospitality becomes more and more considered more of a professional profession, a high-skilled profession, people are looking for career advancement. And we then decided that in order to maintain that what we had and be able to keep the venues we had at the time at the level we wanted to keep at the time, we needed to make ourselves attractive to more staff. And so that then led us to adding more venues in to then be able to create a group where there was opportunity for better work-life balance for people who may not want to work nights. There was an opportunity for us to bring people in and for them to stay with us for years as they progress through their career, rather than just coming in, doing a year or two, and then moving on to another job in order to have career progression. So now we're trying to build more of a group where you can almost start and finish your journey in hospitality with us. And if nothing else, at least we hope that your time with the Speakeasy Group will be a springboard to greater things if you do leave.
Absolutely. In that as well, Sven, it makes a lot of sense. But prior to the episode, you said that a lot of your focus was around education now. And the next thing, which kind of links these two, is the Pathway to Partnership program. I know that's a focus of yours. So I'm interested in how then you've essentially extended those opportunities to stay within the business to actually become part of the business. So I'd really like you to elaborate on that a little bit more, because you described there, it could be your first and last job in the hospitality industry. You could have your whole career here within the Speakeasy Group. But Pathway to Partnership, I understand that there's a process that you have around that as well. And I'm interested to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, Pathway to Partnership is really the most exciting thing, I think, in my professional life. It is a fun concept. When we first started the business, I always had this idea we didn't want to be, these bosses that sit up on top and get fat on everybody else's hard work. And we wanted to be able to mentor and bring people up into a position of ownership. And we've tried various things along the years. Like Jack Sotti, when he was at Boilermaker, owned a percentage of that business. We've tried a variety of other mechanics to bring a team into ownership. The Roosevelt, which was our second venue in Sydney, is now more or less wholly owned by the manager, Ben Hickey, who took over as manager there for a while and then later took over the ownership of the business as well. So it's always been something we wanted to do, but we struggled to find the right format. Pathway to Partnership is almost built on copying like a tech incubator approach to things. So we basically invite we hope to expand to 10 people, 8 to 10 people per year that then goes an interview process, and we select these 8 people from a number of applicants. And then they engage in a 10-month program. And during that 10-month program, it's quite scheduled. Every month we run a large session on a specific topic. It can be anything from budgeting and creating concepts to marketing, HR, a whole bunch of aspects of running a business. And then we provide on top of that some reading materials, mostly around leadership and business management for people to kind of understand some of the more, I suppose the other aspects of running a business than just being in hospitality. And we provide one-on-one mentorship. So both Greg and I will meet once a month with the various people for a one-on-one mentorship call where they can talk about anything. And we just kind of build up this 10-month journey. And at the end of those 10 months, each person puts forward an idea for a venue, a business plan, if you like. And then we select a winner. And the idea here is that these guys aren't going to own 5% of the business or 10% of the business. It's a 50-50% partnership. But as a group, we will put up 90% of the money required to set this business up. They have to find 10, but they still own 50% of the business. And they are on salary when they are creating it and setting it up. So the idea is to give our team that opportunity to then go on to become an owner of a business rather than just working for someone else. And it doesn't suit everybody. Not everybody wants that entrepreneurial opportunity. Not everybody wants that stress. But we hope that for those that go on that journey, whether or not they end up opening one with us or not, we do hope that they've learned a lot about the business of bars, the business of restaurants, and what it takes to make a successful hospitality venue. And the first one we did was with Pez and Boon down in Melbourne, Pearl Diver Cocktails and Oysters.
I'll mention there, Sven, both ex-guests of the show from way, way back in the early days of the podcast.
Those guys are incredible, right? Opening with them was brilliant. They picked up a Best Restaurant Bar at Bar Awards this year, and it's been quite a journey. And it's an ongoing journey. Now we're wrapping up the second year of Pathway to Partnership, and we're about to sit down and go through all the proposals. And I think the deadline is the 30th of September. It's happening very soon as the recording takes place, at least.
Listeners from other industries will obviously be familiar with aspects of things that you've described there, but what Pathway to Partnership, that program for you, is actually doing is something that is revolutionary within hospitality. I've not heard about it anywhere else within the industry. So it's super exciting to see that roll out. And as you said, in the second year now, and Boon and Pez, so Alex Boon and Pez Collier, for listeners who want to go back and listen to their episodes way back. They're doing some really amazing things, and both very skilled hospitality professionals in their own right as well. It takes a lot to win this against your competitors, to pitch to Sven and Greg, listeners out there. But it's great to see the sorts of things that you're doing for the industry, and quite clearly really want the best for the industry, because it really does help staff. And I've known in my time that once a lot of professionals get experienced enough, they get into a management role and then they're like, cool, what now? They either leave the industry, they want to go to a bigger group or hotel or something larger, or own their own venue. And that's essentially what you're providing for them, is the opportunity to do that. It's an easier way to do that, which is really amazing to see. Just wanted to make that quick comment for you, Sven.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. No, it's been, we haven't seen it elsewhere either, but it's definitely one of the big things that motivates us at the moment. It's a fun thing to do for us as well.
A question that I really do want to open up as we do track into the latter end of the episode is, what are you learning about or exploring at the moment? What you're focusing on developing, on building, maybe you're reading something. I'd like to know where your attention is currently.
Ooh, I read a lot. From a business perspective, I've got an amazing business partner in our company, Greg Sanderson, who runs operationally the Speakeasy Group day to day. And what I try to focus on now in terms of learning is, we've set up an e-commerce side of the business with our Viking mode, which is basically a business that kind of supports our Mjolnir restaurants. And then we have our training platform, Ananas, which provides training and management solutions for bars and restaurants. And so what I'm currently spending a lot of time learning about is more about those industries, how I can use the skills and the talents and the connections and the knowledge we have from hospitality, and how we can use that as we're branching out into a SaaS business in terms of Ananas and e-commerce for Viking mode. Having been in hospitality for so long, it's quite refreshing to then almost operate still within hospitality, but more kind of fringe of hospitality, and learn how to operate these kinds of businesses rather than, I suppose, just continuing with what I've been doing for so long.
I can understand from the perspective of, you are very much entrenched in hospitality, and a lot of operators become focused on a specific version of retail, being, as you described before, food and bev, delivering that product in that space, but not looking in an adjacent way at what's happening in tech, as you described, or what's happening in manufacturing, or these sorts of adjacent. People look at fashion, people look at all sorts of other things to really drive their, certainly from a branding front, but what actually drives their businesses. So interesting to hear that. I'd like to go a slightly different direction and address something that you said a little bit earlier. And I appreciate your honesty in the answer, which was, when you're looking at locations, that there isn't a lot of data that really drives that. And that's actually, I believe that's true of most people who are independent getting into the space, or even long-standing operators like yourself, have a number of venues. There's not a lot of data that really drives those decisions. So I appreciate your honesty in that answer. There must then be a creative aspect to, and I'm not specifically focusing on that around location. What I'm actually bridging this to is around creativity, and how you work through those creative problems, or work through those problems creatively to find solutions. So I'd like to focus a bit more on your creativity and what it is that you do as a creative person to deal with problems and find solutions.
I think with creativity, when we are come up with concepts or venues or things to do, right, we have a very specific metric, and it's a super simple metric. And it's a fuck yeah or it's a no. That's the rule. If Greg and I are discussing a new opportunity or a new idea, and we're both like, yeah, it could be pretty rad, or yeah, it could be pretty profitable, or those are no's. We're not doing those things. If we're both on the phone going, fuck yeah, this is going to be amazing, then we will find a way to deliver that product. I think Mjolnir is a great example of an absolutely wacky idea. Mjolnir is, for those who don't know, is a Viking-inspired, and not Viking-themed, but Viking-inspired restaurant in Redfern off Cleveland Street in Sydney. The location is terrible. The venue itself had amazing potential, but had to complete this repair for a long time. And we struggled with the concept of for ages. When I finally called up Greg and said, hey, how can we name the place after Thor's hammer, Mjolnir? And we create a origin story where actual owner of the venue is Thor, the Viking god of thunder. And we are gonna, he's basically homesick and wants to relive the merriment of Asgard and Valhalla. And he builds this place that's then we will have big meaty dishes, bones, and drink beer out of horns and that kind of thing. And he's, fuck yeah, let's do that. There's no research. We could have done all the research in the world and it would have come back very clearly. That is a dumb idea. But it was successful that we opened one in Melbourne, not within a year of the one in Sydney. And so I think creatively, that's what we look for, things that really spark a passion. And that way, success isn't just financial. I think if you're choosing to do something specifically with the goal of making money, that's the goal, then the only way you can measure success is by making money. However, if you do something to fulfill a creative itch or to do something that you're really passionate about, then success can be measured many other ways. Obviously, you need the product and the project to be profitable, but there are a whole bunch of other metrics around it that then deliver that feeling of success or fulfillment for you, which is how we approach businesses. And then we just have to find ways to problem solve around that.
I appreciate that you've expanded on success too, because that has come up in episodes before. To stick with creativity, I'd like to open that up just a little bit more on your process, like your creative process. How do you actually come up with something? Because in your story there, great story, and I've not heard that before, but how you've come up with this idea, then you've got to entertain that idea. How do you generate it? Firstly, or do you get into a particular headspace to come up with ideas? Are you doing things? Are you walking? Are you like, people do different things. And then how do you play with that idea to yourself to make it great before you present it to other people?
I think for me, the brainstorming is a never-ending process for me. Whether I'm working out or going for a walk or whatever, I normally have something with me that allows me to then quickly record an idea if I have one. But for me, thoughts and concepts are properly formed either in conversation or as I'm putting words on paper. So I find quite often, if you may engage with someone about a topic in a bar or at someone's house, that you may not be, prior to having that conversation, necessarily have made up your mind on where you sit or think a lot about that particular piece. But once you engage in conversation, you find out very quickly how you feel about it as you start talking on that topic. And so the same is for me. So if I've got an idea, quite often I will call Greg or I'll call my wife or I'll talk to a friend and we'll bash that around a bit and just to get some more meat on the bones. And then I will sit down and I will write it up and I'll look for images and I'll look for things that inspire me. And it can be, with the case of Milner, it was a whole bunch of things. It was talking about the drinking beer out of horns and with this idea of the knives. And you start pulling it all together. And then the backstory with Thor came in. And the more I write down, the more succinct and concise the concept becomes. And by the time we go out and do anything about it, we have a pretty in-depth concept. And quite often you throw the concept out as well. You just realize this isn't going to work, or I'm no longer passionate about where this is heading. So I don't really have a specific process outside of brainstorming is constant, always thinking about things we want to do. And then it's really putting it on paper that makes it work for me. But in between that, I like to have that human interaction and conversation where we can bash these ideas around a bit.
Sven, there's a question that I ask on almost every single episode. I'd really like to know from you what your biggest challenge is right now. This is around friction. So where are you experiencing friction in your personal, professional life currently?
Oh, goodness. I can go on with that for ages. I think right now in hospitality, I think the staff shortages has been a big problem. And I think it's something that's going to be with us for a while. But the friction that creates, it's very easy to try to just go, I just need people, and just hire the first person that you think may be able to or may not be able to do the job, rather than hanging out for the right person. And I think that's causing friction at the moment in our business and many other businesses. It's just this idea that we need bodies, and then we don't practice the patience to find the right people to join us. And that's having a big impact on life as well, because we are lucky and we're fortunate to be in a position where we actually don't have a massive staff shortage. We're pretty good, but we are internally working on the process of finding the right people to add to the team. And I think the industry at large really is struggling with this skills and staff shortage at the moment.
So how are you solving that problem?
I think I mentioned before, we built a training and management platform a few years ago called Ananas. And so what that training platform does is that it provides all the industry generic training, if you like, that you need to know. So, how to carry plates and how to tap beer or change kegs, or the difference between gin and vodka, whatever it is, lives on there. And then it provides an environment for you to build systems that you can then train your team on and test them on it. So that having those systems in place means that we don't need senior management team to constantly be dedicating their time to onboard and train new staff. And it allows new staff to come in to access a whole bunch of information that allows them to plug the gap in their knowledge of industry in general through the training that already exists. And then it allows them to become more familiar with how we want things done more quickly, because they can access it through their phone or on a computer or an iPad. So for us, that's been a real game changer and really how we've been able to deal with it. And in this environment as well, staff want to work in a place where they're going to be trained, because a lot of them are coming into that venue or that industry without a lot of prior knowledge or experience. So that's been a huge thing for us. I'm obviously massively biased since it's a product that we've created, but it is making a huge difference for us.
That's good. That's what's important. If you were talking about it to go, okay, like other people should use this product, sure. But if it's actually benefiting you as a business and you've created the product, then it makes sense. It's a problem that you're trying to solve. You've created a product to solve that problem. It's working for you. If it works for other people, that's fantastic too, because ultimately you're creating it to solve a problem for yourselves. To me, that sounds like it actually does what it's supposed to do anyway. I'd like to know, Sven, who are you inspired by? I've not really asked this question too many times, but I'm looking for your answer.
Interesting one. Almost every person out have found some inspiration in their parents or their grandparents. And my mom has always inspired me with her go-get attitude and being able to get things done and be able to fight down and meet hardship and be able to get through things. Beyond that, I don't have a lot of idols that I look up to, but I do love coming across people who don't want to stop learning. So if I have anyone I can pick out, Tim Ferriss, I'm not sure Tim Ferriss inspires you, but Tim Ferriss has a podcast I really enjoy because it's always about getting into how people are achieving things and how people are able to do things. And I have a few friends in my life that are the same, that are very much about improving people's lives, whether it's their own or others, through constant learning and then sharing those learnings and this newfound knowledge and skills with others. Not sure that's the big and amazing answer, but for me, I don't think I look up to any famous or follow any celebrities or any of that stuff, but I do really appreciate the people in my life in general that are on this never-ending journey of learning or never-ending journey of adventure. I do have a few friends who are able to really live in the moment and get the most out of every day or the most out of every week. And I think that's a highly valuable quality. We're only on here for a short time, right? And so we want to have a good time over here as well.
It's been a fantastic episode with you today. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's been an interview that has been a long time coming, and we haven't even scratched the surface on a lot of questioning that I have here that I'd love to open up with you. I'd love to sit down and catch up and have a chat about these things at another time. But right now, I just have one last question for you today, and that's, who would you like to hear on the show?
Ooh, oh man, there's so many people who I think I do listening to from the industry. Justine Baker, if you haven't had her on board yet, she was the CEO for Solitel. I find her to be an absolute wealth of knowledge and has a great take on things. Paul Watterson, CEO from the Australian Menu Company. I think he's an incredible guy. And during COVID, I was able to reach out to him and talk to him about the problems that were going on. And he's got a unique approach or a unique take on hospitality from his position as the CEO for what I think is the largest hospitality group in the country. As part of Ananas, we had a short period where we did podcasts as well. And I think we had one of the best ones that I did that I learned the most from was Paige Orbert. She was the founder of the Coleman's Academy. And again, she's such an amazing person and really open to open up and talk about vulnerable and hard things. So those are all people that I enjoy listening to and talking to. That would be great to have on a podcast if they haven't been already.
Perfect. None of those people have been on. And it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. We've never spoken or heard each other's voices before catching up today. Yeah, it's been a really incredible experience to sit down and chat with you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much as well, man. I really appreciate the questions and the thought that went into everything. And it's been a real joy being on here. It's been a good start to my day. Thank you so much for having me.
This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.